I'm Olivia Mitchell, 28, and I never thought my own family would betray me like this. After working 3 jobs for 2 years to buy my dream car, a vintage 1967 Mustang, I returned from my business trip to find it gone. My parents had sold it to fund my younger sister Emma's wedding. "We thought you wouldn't mind," my mother said casually, as if she hadn't just sold a piece of my soul. What they didn't know was that this betrayal would set off a chain of events that would change our family forever. Hey everyone, before I dive deeper into how my family's betrayal turned my life upside down, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments below. If this family drama already has you hooked, please hit that like button and subscribe to my channel for more real-life revenge stories that will leave you shocked. Trust me, you'll want to stick around to see how I made my parents and sister regret their decision in ways they never imagined. Now, let's get back to how it all started. Growing up as the oldest daughter in the Mitchell family meant one thing: responsibility. From the time I was 12, I became the designated babysitter for Emma, who was 5 years younger. Our parents, Richard and Diana Mitchell, owned a successful insurance company in a suburban Connecticut town where appearances mattered more than anything. They had clear expectations. I would be the academic achiever who would eventually take over the family business, while Emma would be the social butterfly who would marry well and maintain our family's status in the community. I played my part perfectly. I graduated valedictorian from high school, earned a full scholarship to Yale for business, and graduated with honors. While my peers enjoyed college parties and spring breaks, I was interning at prestigious firms and taking extra courses. Emma, meanwhile, dropped out of community college after 1 semester, claiming it wasn't her thing. Instead of pushing her as they had pushed me, my parents laughed it off, saying she was too creative for traditional education. The disparity in how we were treated was glaring, but something I had accepted as normal. When Emma needed money for a shopping spree, my parents readily handed over their credit card. When I needed textbooks, I was reminded about building character through working for what I wanted. This dynamic continued well into our adult years. After college, I took a junior position at our family's insurance company, working 60-hour weeks to prove my worth. I lived frugally, saving every penny. My dream since childhood had been to own a classic car, specifically, a 1967 Ford Mustang in Highland Green. It wasn't just about having a cool car, it represented freedom to me, an escape from the constant pressure of being the perfect daughter. For 2 years, I worked my main job at the family business plus 2 side hustles. Weekend shifts at a local bookstore and online freelance work in digital marketing. I skipped vacations, turned down dates, and lived in a tiny studio apartment to save money. My parents thought I was being unnecessarily frugal, but I had my eyes on the prize. The day I finally found my dream car was the happiest day of my life. It wasn't in perfect condition, the previous owner had maintained the engine well, but the interior needed work, and there were some rust spots on the body. But it was mine. I paid $32,000 in cash, money I had saved entirely on my own. My parents seemed oddly underwhelmed when I drove it to their house to show them. "It needs a lot of work," my father commented, circling the car with a critical eye. "And that color is so masculine," my mother added, wrinkling her nose. Only Emma seemed genuinely happy for me, bouncing around the car and asking for rides. I didn't know then that her enthusiasm wasn't for my achievement but for the car itself. For the next year, I poured my heart and soul into restoring that Mustang. Every weekend was spent in auto shops or learning to do minor repairs myself. I reupholstered the seats in authentic vintage leather, replaced the carpeting, and had the exterior professionally restored to its original glory. When I was finished, the car wasn't just transportation, it was a work of art, a symbol of my determination and independence. The timing couldn't have been more perfect because I had just received an opportunity that would change my career trajectory. A major insurance conglomerate in Seattle had offered me a position as a regional director, a significant step up from my role in the family business. The job would require me to relocate to the West Coast for at least 6 months of intensive training. My parents were surprisingly supportive, claiming they were proud of me for spreading my wings, though I later realized they had ulterior motives for wanting me gone. I decided to leave my Mustang at my parents' house while I was away. Their property had a detached garage where the car would be protected from the elements, and I trusted them to take care of it. Before leaving, I gave my father specific instructions about maintenance. The car needed to be started regularly, the fluids checked, and it shouldn't be driven more than a few miles per month just to keep everything in working order. "Don't worry so much, Olivia," my father said, placing a hand on my shoulder. "Your car will be here waiting for you when you get back." I believed him. That was my first mistake. My return to Connecticut was meant to be a happy surprise. After 6 months of intensive training, 12-hour workdays, and proving myself in a new environment, I had been officially promoted to regional director 3 months earlier than expected. I hadn't told my family I was coming home because I wanted to see their genuine reactions to my success. The flight from Seattle landed at Bradley International Airport on a crisp autumn morning. I took a taxi to my parents' suburban home, my heart light with anticipation. I had gifts for everyone, a handcrafted jewelry box for my mother, a rare first edition book for my father, and designer perfume for Emma. I was even bringing home a bottle of champagne to celebrate my promotion. For once, I wanted my achievements to be acknowledged without qualification, without the subtle hints that I could have done better. The house looked exactly the same: perfectly manicured lawn, seasonal wreaths on the front door, my mother's prized hydrangeas in full bloom. I used my key to let myself in, calling out, "Hello? Anyone home?" My mother emerged from the kitchen, her face registering shock before settling into a forced smile. "Olivia. What a surprise. We weren't expecting you for another 3 months." "I got promoted early," I explained, hugging her. She felt stiff in my arms. "Is Dad around? And Emma?" "Your father's at the office. Emma's out with Tyler. They're finalizing the wedding venue." I nodded, setting down my bags. Tyler was Emma's fiancé of 2 months, a wealthy real estate developer's son whom she'd met at a charity gala. The engagement had been swift, and from our phone conversations, I gathered the wedding planning was moving at an equally rapid pace. "That's fine. I'll catch up with them later," I said. "I'm going to put my luggage away and then check on my car. I've missed driving it so much." My mother's expression changed subtly, a tightening around the eyes, a slight twitch of her lips. "Oh, honey, why don't you relax first? I'll make you some tea." Her deflection triggered an alarm bell in my mind. "I'll have tea after I see my car," I insisted, already moving toward the back door that led to the detached garage. "Olivia, wait," my mother called after me, her voice higher than normal. I ignored her, crossing the backyard with quickening steps. The garage door was unlocked, another red flag, as my father was meticulous about security. I pulled it open and stepped inside. The space where my Mustang should have been was empty. For a moment, I thought I had somehow forgotten which garage held my car. Our property had 2, one attached to the house and this detached one. But I knew I was in the right place. The special drip pan I had placed under the car to catch any oil leaks was still there. So were my specialized tools on the workbench, the custom car cover folded neatly on a shelf. Everything was there except my car. I stood frozen, trying to process what I was seeing, or rather, what I wasn't seeing. My mother appeared behind me, her breathing shallow. "Where's my car?" I asked, my voice eerily calm despite the panic rising within me. "Olivia, please try to understand," she began, wringing her hands. "Emma and Tyler moved up their wedding date. They want to get married in December, not next spring. The venue they wanted, that beautiful lakeside resort, had a cancellation for December 15th, but they needed a deposit immediately." I turned to face her, understanding beginning to dawn. "What does that have to do with my car?" The deposit was substantial, and with the shortened timeline, all the other expenses were due sooner than we expected. Your father and I had to make a difficult decision. You sold my car. It wasn't a question. My mother nodded, not quite meeting my eyes. Emma was so stressed about possibly losing her dream venue. And you weren't going to be using the car for months anyway. We thought. You thought what? My voice rose. That my property was yours to dispose of? That the car I worked 3 jobs to afford, that I spent a year restoring, was just an asset you could liquidate for Emma's wedding? We were going to replace it, she protested. After the wedding, we planned to help you find another one. Another one? I laughed incredulously. That car was irreplaceable. It was a specific year, model, and color that I searched for years to find. It had sentimental value that can't be replicated by just buying another one. My mother's face hardened slightly. I think you're overreacting, Olivia. It's just a car. Emma's wedding is a once-in-a-lifetime event. I stared at her, seeing clearly for the first time the depth of the disparity in how she viewed me versus my sister. Who bought it? I demanded. Who has my car now? I don't think that's. Who has it, Mom? She sighed. Tyler's father, Stanley Briggs. He's a collector. He paid a very good price, much more than you spent on it originally. The irony was bitter. The car had been sold to someone who probably had a whole collection, who wouldn't value it the way I did. It was likely sitting in a temperature-controlled garage, being admired but not driven, not loved. Does Emma know? I asked, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. My mother hesitated, then nodded. She was concerned, but we assured her you would understand. Family comes first, after all. I laughed again, a hollow sound that seemed to echo in the empty garage. Family comes first? Is that what you tell yourself to justify always putting Emma's wants before my needs? That's not fair, Olivia. We've always supported both of you equally. Equally? I spat the word. When have you ever made Emma sacrifice anything? When have you ever sold something of hers to benefit me? My mother didn't answer, her silence a damning confirmation. I need to leave, I said, turning toward the house. I can't stay here right now. Don't be dramatic, my mother called after me. Your father will be home soon. We can all talk about this rationally. But there was nothing rational about what they had done. This wasn't just about a car. It was about respect, about boundaries, about the realization that in my family's hierarchy, I would always come second. As I packed the few things I had just unpacked, I made a decision. This betrayal wouldn't stand unanswered. My parents and sister had taken something precious from me without consent or consideration. It was time they learned that actions have consequences. I checked into a hotel in downtown Hartford, a sleek high-rise far removed from my parents' suburban neighborhood. The anonymity of the place suited my mood. I was a stranger here, unbound by family expectations or history. I spent the first night alternating between rage and disbelief, pacing the confines of my room until exhaustion finally claimed me around dawn. The next morning, clarity began to emerge from the chaos of my emotions. I needed information before I could determine my next steps. I called the office of the family business, speaking to Janet, my father's longtime assistant. Janet, it's Olivia. I need access to all the files related to the Briggs accounts. Olivia. We weren't expecting you back yet. Those files are confidential, and your father. I'm a director of the company, I reminded her, my voice firm. And the Briggs family has been our client for 20 years. I'm working on a special project and need those files immediately. She hesitated but ultimately relented. I'll email them to you within the hour. Next, I called Tyler's father's office directly, using the pretext of insurance business to get past his assistant. Mr. Briggs, this is Olivia Mitchell from Mitchell Insurance. I believe you recently acquired a 1967 Mustang from my father. Ah, yes. Stanley Briggs's voice was jovial. Beautiful machine. Your father mentioned it belonged to you originally. Hope there are no hard feelings about the sale. I forced warmth into my voice. None at all. Actually, I had some documentation and maintenance records for the car that my father forgot to give you. I was wondering if I could drop them off personally? I'd love to see where my old car ended up. Of course, my dear. I'd be delighted to show you my collection. How about tomorrow afternoon? I agreed to meet him at 2 p.m. the following day, already formulating the next phase of my plan. After hanging up, I turned my attention to the files Janet had sent. The Briggs family had been clients of Mitchell Insurance for 2 decades, with policies covering everything from their homes and vehicles to their business interests. Tyler's father was indeed wealthy, but as I dug deeper into the files, I discovered something interesting. His fortune wasn't as solid as it appeared. Stanley Briggs had overextended himself in recent years, investing heavily in commercial real estate developments that had yet to turn a profit. He was leveraging one property to finance another, creating a precarious financial house of cards. More importantly, I discovered that several of his insurance policies had clauses that could be problematic if scrutinized closely, clauses that my father had inserted to give the Briggs family favorable rates at the expense of full coverage. This wasn't just about getting my car back anymore. This was about exposing the preferential treatment that had defined my family dynamic for years. My father had bent rules for the Briggs family just as he had always bent rules for Emma. It was time to show them all what happens when the overlooked daughter decides to stop playing by their rules. That evening, I received a flurry of calls and texts from my family. My father left voicemails expressing concern about my overreaction. Emma sent messages alternating between defensive justification and half-hearted apologies. I responded to none of them. Instead, I spent the night researching insurance regulations and planning my approach for the meeting with Stanley Briggs. The next day, I dressed in my most professional outfit, a charcoal gray suit that projected authority and competence. I arrived at the Briggs estate precisely at 2 p.m., a leather portfolio tucked under my arm containing what appeared to be car documentation but actually held evidence of insurance irregularities I had compiled overnight. Stanley Briggs welcomed me warmly, leading me through his sprawling mansion to a separate building that housed his car collection. The space was immaculate, gleaming floors, perfect lighting, and a dozen vintage automobiles arranged in a semicircle. In the center, as if on display for my benefit, sat my Mustang. The sight of it hit me harder than I had anticipated. The Highland green paint caught the light exactly as I remembered, the restored chrome bumpers reflecting the overhead lights. This was my car, the embodiment of my hard work and dreams, now serving as a trophy in someone else's collection. "She's a beauty, isn't she?" Stanley said, mistaking my silence for admiration. "One of the best examples of a 67 I've seen. Your father mentioned you did some of the restoration work yourself." "I did all of it," I corrected him quietly. "Every piece of upholstery, every bit of detailing. I even helped with the engine rebuild." He raised an eyebrow, clearly surprised. "Impressive. Most young women don't have that kind of mechanical aptitude." I let the casual sexism pass without comment, focusing instead on moving my plan forward. "Mr. Briggs, before I give you these documents, there's something we should discuss regarding your insurance coverage." "Oh?" His interest was piqued. "Is there a problem?" "Not exactly a problem," I said carefully. "More of a potential opportunity to ensure you're properly covered. I've been reviewing your policies as part of my new role as regional director, and I've noticed some areas where you might be vulnerable." I opened my portfolio and began to outline what I had found: the specialized clauses, the potential coverage gaps, the questionable practices that had been implemented to keep his premiums artificially low. His expression grew increasingly concerned as I spoke. "I wasn't aware of any of this," he said finally. "Richard has always handled everything. He assured me we had the best coverage possible." "The best affordable coverage," I corrected. "There's a difference. And in your position, with the extent of your assets, these gaps could be catastrophic if something were to happen." He nodded slowly, running a hand through his silver hair. "What do you suggest?" This was the opening I had been waiting for. "I can help restructure your policies to ensure comprehensive coverage, but it will require a complete overhaul of your current arrangement. And given the irregularities I've found, I would need to handle this personally, not through my father." "I see," he said, studying me with new interest. "And what would be required from me?" I closed my portfolio deliberately. First, complete transparency about your assets and financial situation. Second, a demonstration of good faith. And what would constitute good faith in your eyes, Ms. Mitchell? I looked directly at my Mustang, then back at him. I think you know. Understanding dawned in his eyes, followed by a calculating look. The car means that much to you? It does, I admitted. But more importantly, this transaction between you and my father was conducted without my consent, involving property that wasn't his to sell. From an insurance and legal perspective, that's problematic. I didn't explicitly threaten to report the insurance irregularities, but the implication hung in the air between us. Stanley Briggs was a businessman first and foremost. He recognized both a threat and an opportunity when he saw one. Let me think about this, he said finally. The car is technically mine now, legally purchased. With money that funded my sister's wedding, I added pointedly. A wedding that Tyler seems quite invested in. The mention of his son's name shifted something in his expression. You wouldn't. I'm simply pointing out that families are complicated, Mr. Briggs. And sometimes, doing the right thing is also the smart thing. He studied me for a long moment, then nodded slightly. I'll need a few days to consider my options. Of course, I agreed smoothly. I'll expect to hear from you by the end of the week. As I turned to leave, he called after me, You're not much like your father, are you? I paused, looking back at him over my shoulder. No, Mr. Briggs. I'm not. And that's something everyone is about to learn. Walking back to my rental car, I felt a surge of satisfaction. Phase 1 of my plan was in motion. Stanley Briggs would either return my car willingly or face the consequences of his long-standing arrangement with my father. Either way, the comfortable status quo that had benefited everyone but me was about to be disrupted. And I was just getting started. 3 days after my meeting with Stanley Briggs, I received a text message from my sister, We need to talk. Please. It was the first direct communication I'd responded to since discovering the sale of my car. I agreed to meet Emma at a cafe downtown, a neutral territory away from our parents' influence. I arrived early, selecting a table in the corner that afforded a view of the entire space. Emma was 15 minutes late, typical of her, always operating on her own schedule, confident that others would wait. She swept in wearing designer sunglasses and a camel hair coat that probably cost more than a month of my rent. Olivia, she said, sliding into the seat across from me. You look different. Seattle changed you. Seattle didn't change me, I replied evenly. Discovering that my family sees me as an afterthought did. She sighed dramatically, removing her sunglasses to reveal eyes rimmed with carefully applied makeup to simulate exhaustion. That's not fair. We don't see you that way at all. The car was just a timing issue. A timing issue, I repeated flatly. Is that what you call selling someone else's property without their consent? It wasn't like that, she protested. Dad said he would replace it for you after the wedding. We needed the money quickly, and the car was just sitting there. It was sitting there because I trusted my family to respect my property while I was away building my career. A career, by the way, that I've been working toward while you've been floating from one interest to another for years. Emma's expression hardened slightly. Not everyone wants the boring corporate path you chose. Some of us have different priorities. Like rushing into marriage with a man you've known for 6 months? I asked pointedly. Tyler and I are in love, she snapped. Not that you would understand. When's the last time you even went on a date? All you care about is work and that stupid car. I remained calm, which I knew would irritate her more than any emotional outburst. That stupid car represented years of my hard work and sacrifice. But you wouldn't understand that concept, would you? Everything has always been handed to you. That's not true. I work hard too, just in different ways. Like planning an extravagant wedding that our parents are paying for? I raised an eyebrow. Speaking of which, how are the plans coming along? Still set for December at the lakeside resort? Something in my tone made her pause. Why do you ask like that? Just curious about the event that was apparently so important it justified stealing from me. Emma leaned forward, lowering her voice. Look, I know you're upset, and maybe we should have waited until you got back to discuss it. But it's done now. The deposit is paid, the date is set. Tyler's father already added your car to his collection catalog. I couldn't help but smile at that. Yes, I've seen it in his garage. Quite impressive. Her eyes widened. You've been to Stanley's house? Why? Insurance business, I said vaguely. Did you know Tyler's father has been a client of our family firm for 20 years? We've handled all his policies. So? Emma looked confused. What does that have to do with anything? Nothing directly, I shrugged. But it's interesting how interconnected everything is, isn't it? Your fiancé's family and ours, business and personal relationships all tangled together. Emma's confusion was gradually giving way to suspicion. What are you planning, Olivia? Planning? I'm just trying to understand how my car ended up paying for your wedding. Tell me, did you know it was happening before they sold it, or was it a surprise to you too? She hesitated just long enough for me to know the truth. They mentioned they might need to liquidate some assets for the deposit. And you knew exactly which asset they were talking about. She had the grace to look slightly ashamed. I didn't specifically suggest your car. But you didn't object either, I noted. Even though you knew how much it meant to me. Even though I've never once asked them to sell anything of yours for my benefit. That's different. You've always been the independent one, the strong one. You don't need our help the way I do. The twisted logic of our family dynamic was laid bare in that simple statement. Because I had learned to function without their support, I was deemed undeserving of it. Because Emma had remained dependent, she was considered entitled to whatever she needed, even if it came at my expense. Let me ask you something, I said, keeping my voice level. If your wedding is so important that it justifies taking something precious from me, what else might be justified in the name of family support? She frowned. What do you mean? I'm just wondering where the line is. If my car can be sold for your deposit, what else might be sacrificed for your happiness? My job, perhaps? My reputation? You're being ridiculous, Emma scoffed, but there was a new wariness in her eyes. Am I? Because from where I'm sitting, it seems like our parents have established that my needs and possessions are less important than yours. I'm just following that logic to its natural conclusion. What are you going to do? She asked, her voice dropping to a whisper. I smiled, the expression not reaching my eyes. I'm going to restore balance, Emma. That's all. Olivia, please, she reached across the table, trying to take my hand. I pulled away. It's just a car. Don't do anything that would ruin things between us. Ruin things? You mean like selling my prized possession without my consent? That kind of ruining things? I'm getting married in 6 weeks, she pleaded. Everything is planned. The venue, the flowers, the dress. Please don't mess this up for me. In that moment, looking at her panicked expression, I realized Emma had never faced real consequences for her actions. She had always been protected, by our parents, by her beauty, by the assumption that the world should accommodate her desires. It was time for that to change. I have no intention of messing up your wedding, I said calmly. But I am going to get what's rightfully mine. And if that process happens to have some collateral effects, well, that's just how life works sometimes. What does that even mean? Her voice rose slightly, drawing glances from nearby tables. I stood, gathering my coat and bag. It means you should have thought more carefully before benefiting from my loss. It means actions have consequences, Emma. Even yours. As I turned to leave, she called after me, Dad was right about you. You've always been cold, always calculating. No wonder you're alone. I paused, looking back at her. I'd rather be alone by choice than surrounded by people who betray me. Enjoy your wedding planning, Emma. I hope it's everything you deserve. Walking out of the cafe, I felt a strange mixture of sadness and resolve. The confrontation with Emma had confirmed what I already knew. In her mind, and in our parents' minds, my feelings and property were secondary considerations. They had justified their actions with the convenient fiction that I was strong enough to handle the disappointment, that my car was just a material possession rather than the symbol of independence it truly represented. But their justifications didn't matter anymore. What mattered was what came next. I checked my phone to find 3 missed calls from Stanley Briggs. He had made his decision faster than expected. I called him back immediately. "Ms. Mitchell," he answered on the first ring. "I've been considering our conversation." "And?" I prompted. "I believe we can come to an arrangement that benefits us both." "Are you free to meet again tomorrow?" "I am," I confirmed. "Same time?" "Perfect." "And Olivia? You might want to prepare yourself for some changes. I've had some illuminating conversations with my insurance advisors." I smiled to myself. "I look forward to hearing about them, Mr. Briggs." The pieces were falling into place. By this time tomorrow, I would have my car back. But that was just the beginning. The real reckoning would come when my family realized the full extent of what their betrayal had set in motion. Hey everyone, I know you're probably on the edge of your seats wondering what arrangement I made with Stanley Briggs. Trust me, the next part of this story gets even more intense. If you're enjoying this family drama so far, please hit that like button and subscribe to see more stories like this one. I'd love to know what you think is going to happen next. Drop your predictions in the comments below. Now, let's get back to how I turned the tables on my family. The following day, I returned to the Briggs estate with a different energy, confident, focused, and prepared for whatever outcome awaited me. Stanley Briggs greeted me in his study rather than the garage, a telling change that suggested we would be discussing business before pleasure. "Olivia," he gestured to a leather armchair across from his imposing desk. "Thank you for coming. I'm curious about what you've decided," I said, sitting down and placing my portfolio on my lap. Stanley steepled his fingers, studying me with newfound respect. "After our last conversation, I did some investigating of my own. I contacted an independent insurance auditor to review my policies." "A prudent decision," I nodded. "What they found was concerning. The coverage gaps you identified were just the tip of the iceberg. It seems your father has been cutting corners on my policies for years, putting both my business and personal assets at significant risk." I maintained a neutral expression, though inwardly I felt vindicated. "I suspected as much." "Did the auditor make recommendations?" "Yes, extensive ones." He pulled out a folder and slid it across the desk to me. "They suggested a complete restructuring of my coverage, which would increase my premiums by approximately 40%. Quality coverage comes at a price," I remarked, glancing through the folder's contents. "Though I believe I could implement these changes more efficiently, perhaps keeping the increase closer to 30%. Stanley leaned back in his chair. "That's still a substantial difference from what I've been paying." "It is," I agreed. "But consider the alternative, a major claim that's denied due to these loopholes, potentially costing you millions. Not to mention the possibility that these irregularities could be reported to the insurance commission." He nodded slowly, acknowledging the veiled threat. "I built my reputation over decades. I can't afford that kind of scandal, especially with Tyler about to marry into a respected family. Speaking of which," I segued smoothly, "I understand my car has been added to your collection catalog." About that, Stanley's expression shifted. "I've decided that while the car is certainly a beautiful addition, it's not worth the potential complications." "Complications?" "Let's be frank, Olivia. You and I both know that car was sold without proper authorization. If you decided to pursue the matter legally, it could become messy for everyone involved, your parents, your sister's wedding, my son's relationship with your family." I allowed myself a small smile. "So you're proposing a trade," he stated simply. "I return the Mustang to you, and you handle the restructuring of my insurance policies personally, keeping everything discreet. And my father? Will be informed that I've decided to work exclusively with you moving forward. I'll cite your more thorough approach to risk assessment. It was exactly the outcome I had hoped for. Not only would I get my car back, but I would also secure a major client for myself, independent of my father's influence. The fact that this would undermine his business relationship with the Briggs family was a satisfying bonus. I believe we have a deal, Mr. Briggs. I extended my hand across the desk. He shook it firmly. I thought we might. The car keys are in the top drawer of my desk. Consider it a gesture of good faith while we work out the details of my new policies. I opened the drawer and retrieved the familiar key ring with its distinctive Mustang emblem. The weight of it in my palm felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. Thank you, I said simply. Don't thank me, he replied with a knowing look. This is business, pure and simple. You identified leverage and used it effectively. I respect that kind of strategic thinking. We spent the next hour discussing the specifics of his new insurance coverage. By the time we concluded our meeting, I had secured not only my car but also a client whose annual premiums would constitute a significant portion of my personal portfolio at the firm. It was a decisive professional victory, one that would establish my independence within the family business. As I prepared to leave, Stanley walked me to the garage where my Mustang waited. One last thing, he said, as I ran my hand along the car's sleek contours. I'm curious about what happens next with your family. Will you tell them about our new arrangement? No, I decided. They'll find out soon enough. When the time is right. He nodded, seeming to appreciate the calculated patience of my approach. You're quite different from the rest of your family, aren't you? I'm beginning to realize just how different, I admitted. I drove my Mustang away from the Briggs estate with a profound sense of reclamation. The purr of the engine, the feel of the steering wheel beneath my hands, these sensations represented not just the return of my property but the beginning of my emancipation from the unbalanced family dynamic I had endured for years. Instead of returning to my hotel, I drove directly to my own apartment in the city, a place I had maintained even while working in Seattle, precisely because I valued having space that was truly my own. There, I made several important phone calls. First, I contacted the CEO of the insurance conglomerate in Seattle, accepting their offer of a permanent position but negotiating to work remotely from Connecticut for the first year. This would allow me to establish my new business relationship with Stanley Briggs and implement the changes I had promised. Next, I called the state insurance commissioner's office, requesting information about the process for reporting irregularities in coverage policies. I didn't plan to file a report, at least not yet. But I wanted to understand the potential consequences my father might face if such information came to light. The knowledge would be another form of leverage, another card to hold until the right moment. Finally, I contacted a real estate agent about properties in the area. If I was going to be staying in Connecticut longer than originally planned, I wanted a more permanent residence, one that reflected my new status and independence. What I didn't do was call my family. Let them wonder where I was, what I was planning. Let them experience a fraction of the uncertainty and betrayal I had felt upon discovering my car was gone. 3 days passed before my father finally tracked me down at my apartment. The doorman called up to announce his arrival, giving me time to prepare myself mentally for the confrontation. Olivia, my father said when I opened the door, his normally commanding presence diminished by uncertainty. We've been worried sick. You haven't been answering our calls. Come in, I said coolly, stepping aside. I had positioned my car keys prominently on the entry table, where he couldn't miss seeing them. His eyes fell on the key ring, the distinctive Mustang emblem gleaming under the hallway light. He froze. How did I get my car back? I finished for him, closing the door. I negotiated directly with Stanley Briggs. Something you should have done before selling my property without my consent. Stanley gave the car back to you? My father's confusion was evident. That doesn't make sense. He paid good money for it. Yes, he did, I agreed. Money that funded Emma's wedding venue deposit. Money that represented years of my hard work and sacrifice. We were going to replace the car, Olivia. After the wedding. Stop, I cut him off. We both know that's not true. Or if it is, it would have been with something inferior, something that didn't match what was taken from me. My father sighed, running a hand through his graying hair. You're making too much of this. It was just a car. It wasn't just a car, I said quietly. It was a symbol of my independence, of my ability to achieve something without your help or influence. And you took it from me to give Emma yet another thing she hasn't earned. That's unfair to your sister. Is it? I challenged. When has Emma ever worked for anything in her life? When has she faced consequences for her choices? You've always protected her, coddled her, while pushing me to be self-sufficient. My father had the grace to look uncomfortable. We raised you differently because you are different. You've always been stronger, more capable. And that's supposed to justify treating me as less deserving of consideration? Of respect? Of course not, he protested. We respect you immensely. Your actions say otherwise, I observed coldly. But that's going to change now. Something in my tone made him look at me more carefully. What do you mean? Stanley Briggs has decided to work exclusively with me going forward. All his insurance needs will be handled by me personally, not through the family firm. My father's face paled. The Briggs account represents 15% of our annual revenue. I'm aware, I nodded. And now it represents a significant portion of my personal client portfolio. You can't do this, he sputtered. That's a family account. We've handled their insurance for 20 years. And you've been doing it poorly, I countered. Cutting corners, creating coverage gaps, all to keep his premiums artificially low. Did you think that would never come to light? Those arrangements were made with Stanley's full knowledge, my father insisted, though his expression betrayed his discomfort. Were they? Because the independent auditor he consulted seemed to think otherwise. Auditor? Now my father looked truly alarmed. What auditor? The one who reviewed all the Briggs policies after I pointed out some concerning irregularities. The one who recommended a complete restructuring of his coverage. My father sank onto the couch, the implications of what I was saying beginning to dawn on him. You did this deliberately. To punish us. No, I corrected him. I did this to reclaim what was mine and to establish boundaries that you and Mom have consistently ignored. The fact that it impacts the family business is simply a natural consequence of your own actions. Does your mother know about this? Not yet, I said. But she will. As will Emma. Olivia, please, my father's voice took on a pleading quality I had never heard before. This could damage the business significantly. It could affect Emma's wedding plans if we lose that much revenue. I'm aware of the potential impact, I said calmly. Just as you were aware of the impact selling my car would have on me. The difference is, I'm giving you advance notice. You gave me none. My father stood up, anger replacing his initial shock. I never thought you could be this vindictive. This, cruel. Cruel? I laughed incredulously. Is that how you see this? I'm simply operating by the rules you established, that it's acceptable to sacrifice someone else's property and feelings for the benefit of another family member. I learned from the best, Dad. This isn't the same thing, he insisted. Isn't it? You took something that mattered to me to benefit Emma. I've taken something that matters to you for my own benefit. The parallel seems quite clear. He shook his head, moving toward the door. I need to discuss this with your mother. And with our lawyers. By all means, I gestured toward the exit. But before you go, you should know that Stanley Briggs has documentation of all the coverage irregularities in his policies. Documentation that could be very problematic if it reached the insurance commissioner's office. My father froze with his hand on the doorknob. Are you threatening me, Olivia? I'm simply making you aware of the facts, I said smoothly. What you choose to do with that information is up to you. After he left, I sat in my living room for a long time, absorbing the reality of what I had set in motion. There was no going back now. The carefully maintained hierarchy of the Mitchell family was crumbling, and from its ruins, a new dynamic would have to emerge, one in which I would no longer accept second place. The next 2 weeks unfolded exactly as I had anticipated. My father, after consulting with the family's lawyers, realized his position was untenable. The irregularities in the Briggs policies could indeed trigger an investigation if reported, potentially leading to fines, sanctions, or even the loss of his insurance license. The risk was too great, especially when weighed against the already certain loss of the Briggs account. What I hadn't anticipated was my mother's reaction. She showed up at my apartment unannounced one evening, her normally perfect appearance slightly disheveled, her eyes red-rimmed from crying. "How could you do this to your own family?" she demanded as soon as I opened the door. "Your father is devastated. The business could lose other clients if word gets out about the Briggs account." "Hello to you too, Mom," I said, stepping aside to let her in. "Would you like some tea?" My calm demeanor seemed to infuriate her further. "Don't patronize me, Olivia. This isn't a social call. You've deliberately sabotaged your father's business out of spite." "Not spite," I corrected, moving to the kitchen to put on the kettle despite her refusal. "Strategic realignment. The same kind you and Dad implemented when you decided my car was an appropriate funding source for Emma's wedding venue." "That was different," she insisted, following me. "That was a family decision. A family decision that conspicuously excluded the family member most affected by it," I pointed out. "Just like every important decision in our family has always excluded my input or considered my needs secondary to Emma's." "That's not true," my mother protested weakly. "We've always supported both of you." "Differently," I reminded her, echoing my father's earlier justification. "Because we're different. Emma needs more support because she's less capable, less independent. I need less because I'm stronger. It's a convenient narrative that has allowed you and Dad to give her everything while expecting me to fend for myself." "We've always been proud of your independence," my mother said, her voice softening slightly. "Your ambition, your drive. Emma doesn't have those qualities." "Because you never required her to develop them," I said, pouring hot water over tea bags. "You've enabled her dependence her entire life, and now you're surprised that she's dependent." My mother accepted the cup of tea I offered, her hands trembling slightly. "She's different from you, Olivia. More sensitive, more emotional." "And I'm what? Cold? Calculating? Unfeeling?" I sat down across from her at my small kitchen table. "That's the story you've told yourselves to justify the disparity in how you've treated us. But have you ever considered that I developed those traits because I had to? Because from an early age, I understood that no one was going to smooth my path the way they did for Emma?" My mother looked down at her tea, avoiding my gaze. "We never meant to make you feel less important. Intentions don't matter," I said quietly. "Actions do. And your actions have consistently shown that Emma's wants take precedence over my needs." "Is that what this is about? Getting back at us for giving Emma more attention?" "No," I shook my head. "This is about establishing that I won't be taken for granted anymore. That my property and my feelings deserve the same respect as everyone else's in this family." "By taking away a major client from your father's business? By threatening him with regulatory action?" My mother's voice rose. "How is that proportional to us selling a car we were going to replace?" "Because it's not just about the car," I explained patiently. "It's about the pattern. The car was simply the final instance in a lifelong pattern of inequality. And my response isn't just about reclaiming what was mine, it's about redefining our family dynamic moving forward." My mother was silent for a long moment, stirring her tea absently. "Emma's wedding might have to be scaled back if the business loses that much revenue." "I'm aware," I nodded. "That was a foreseeable consequence of your decision to fund her deposit with my property." "She's devastated." The venue was her dream location. I imagine she is disappointed, I acknowledged. Just as I was devastated to discover my dream car had been sold without my consent. It's not the same thing, my mother insisted, though with less conviction than before. No, it's not, I agreed. My car represented years of hard work and personal sacrifice. Emma's venue represents an extravagant expense that she expected others to cover for her. You're right, they're not equivalent at all. My mother set down her cup with a sharp click against the saucer. You've changed, Olivia. There's a hardness to you now that wasn't there before. I haven't changed, I corrected her. I've simply stopped accepting the role assigned to me in our family. The dutiful daughter who never complains, who always understands, who sacrifices without question so that Emma can have whatever she wants. And what happens now? My mother asked quietly. Is this the end of our family as we know it? That depends on all of you, I said. I'm open to building a new relationship based on mutual respect and equality. But I won't return to the old dynamic. That option is no longer available. After my mother left, I received a text message from Emma, "You've ruined everything. The venue canceled our reservation because we couldn't make the second payment on time. I hope you're happy." I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I drove my Mustang to the lakeside resort where Emma had planned to hold her wedding. The property was spectacular, perched on a bluff overlooking a pristine lake, with manicured gardens and a grand ballroom that could accommodate hundreds of guests. It was exactly the kind of opulent venue Emma would choose, with no consideration for the cost or practicality. I met with the event coordinator, who confirmed that the Mitchell wedding had indeed been cancelled due to a missed payment. The date, December 15th, was now available again, though they expected it would be booked quickly given the popularity of holiday season weddings. I'd like to reserve it, I said, surprising myself with the spontaneous decision. For a wedding? The coordinator asked, already reaching for her booking calendar. No, I smiled. For a family reconciliation event. If possible. I paid the deposit with my own credit card, a significant sum, but one I could afford thanks to my new position and client portfolio. As I signed the paperwork, I realized I was offering an olive branch of sorts. Not a surrender, not a return to the old dynamic, but a possibility for something new. That evening, I replied to Emma's text, "The venue is still available for December 15th. The deposit has been paid. We should talk." Her response came almost immediately, "What do you mean? Who paid it?" "I did," I replied simply. "No strings attached. But we need to have an honest conversation about our family dynamic before any wedding plans proceed." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, then appeared again as Emma composed and recomposed her response. Finally, "Why would you do this after everything?" "Because despite it all, you're still my sister. And I want a relationship with you, just not the one we've had all our lives." "Mom and Dad won't accept your terms," she texted back. "They're talking about early retirement because of the Briggs account." "That's their choice," I responded. "But my terms aren't punitive. They're about equality and respect going forward. Something all healthy families should have." The next day, I received a call from my father. His voice was subdued, lacking the anger or accusation of our previous conversation. "Your mother told me about your discussion. And Emma mentioned something about you paying the venue deposit." "I did," I confirmed. "Not as a capitulation, but as a demonstration that I'm interested in finding a path forward for our family." "At what cost?" he asked cautiously. "Acknowledgement," I said firmly. "Of the inequity in how you and Mom have treated Emma and me throughout our lives. Of the disrespect inherent in selling my property without my consent. And a commitment to change that dynamic moving forward." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "Those aren't small things you're asking for, Olivia." "Neither was what I lost," I pointed out. "Not just the car, but years of feeling like my needs and feelings were secondary to Emma's." Another pause, then, "We'd like to meet with you. All of us, your mother, Emma, even Tyler. To discuss everything." I'd like that too, I said honestly. But not at your house. Neutral territory. The lakeside resort, my father suggested. Since you've already paid for it. Next weekend, I agreed. I'll arrange it with the coordinator. As I hung up the phone, I felt a curious lightness. Not the vindictive satisfaction I had anticipated when I first set my plan in motion, but something more complex, a blend of hope, resolution, and newfound strength. Whatever happened at the family meeting, I had reclaimed not just my car but my place in the family dynamic. I would never again allow myself to be overlooked or taken for granted. The path forward might be difficult, might require painful honesty and uncomfortable adjustments for everyone involved. But it was a path that led toward a healthier relationship than the one we had maintained for decades. And that, even more than my beloved Mustang sitting in my parking space, felt like victory. The lakeside resort was even more beautiful in the soft light of early evening. I arrived first, deliberately choosing to be there to greet my family rather than making an entrance after they had assembled. The events coordinator had arranged a private dining room overlooking the lake, with a circular table that symbolically placed everyone on equal footing, no head of the table, no hierarchy implied by the seating arrangement. My parents arrived together, both dressed formally as if for a business meeting rather than a family reconciliation. Emma and Tyler came separately, 15 minutes late as usual. Tyler looked uncomfortable, clearly uncertain of his role in what was essentially a family dispute. "Thank you all for coming," I said once everyone was seated and drinks had been served. "I know this isn't easy for any of us. You've put us in an impossible position, Olivia," my father began, but my mother laid a restraining hand on his arm. "Let's not start with accusations," she suggested quietly. "We're here to find a way forward." I nodded appreciatively at her. "Yes, we are. And to do that, we need to be honest about how we got here." "You mean how you blackmailed Stanley Briggs into returning your car and giving you his business?" Emma interjected, her tone bitter. "I mean how our family dynamic has consistently prioritized your needs and wants over mine," I corrected calmly. The car and the business consequences were symptoms of a deeper problem, not the problem itself. "That's not fair," my father protested. "We've supported both of you throughout your lives." "Differently," I acknowledged. "That's the word you both keep using. You supported us differently because we're different people with different needs. But the result has been a profound imbalance that became unsustainable." "So you decided to blow up the family business?" my father challenged. "I decided to establish boundaries and consequences," I countered. "Something that has been notably absent in our family when it comes to Emma's behavior and your decisions about my property." Tyler, who had been silent until now, cleared his throat. "If I may, from an outsider's perspective, it does seem like there's been some inequity in how you've treated your daughters, Mr. and Mrs. Mitchell." My father looked at him in surprise, clearly having expected solidarity from his future son-in-law. Emma shot him a betrayed glance. "My father explained the situation with the insurance policies," Tyler continued. "The irregularities Olivia identified were real, and potentially serious. The fact that she offered a path to rectify them rather than reporting them immediately shows restraint, not vindictiveness." "Thank you, Tyler," I said, genuinely appreciative of his unexpected support. "I'm not taking sides," he clarified. "But as someone who's about to join this family, I think it's important that we build on a foundation of honesty and fairness." Emma's expression softened slightly as she looked at her fiancé with new respect. Perhaps she was realizing that the man she was marrying had principles that aligned more with mine than with the family dynamic she had benefited from all her life. "What exactly do you want from us, Olivia?" my mother asked directly. "You've paid the venue deposit. You've reclaimed your car. You've established your professional independence with the Briggs account. What more do you need to move forward?" It was the question I had been waiting for, the one that would determine whether real change was possible in our family. "I want acknowledgement," I said simply. "Recognition that the way you've treated Emma and me has been unbalanced and unfair. I want a commitment to change that dynamic going forward." And I want a genuine apology for selling my car without my consent, not an explanation or justification, but an admission that it was wrong. My parents exchanged glances, a silent communication passing between them. My father sighed heavily, his shoulders slumping slightly as if the weight of years of decisions was finally settling on him. "You're right," he said finally, the words clearly difficult for him. "We have treated you and Emma differently, and not always fairly. We justified it by telling ourselves it was what each of you needed, but the truth is, we enabled Emma's dependence while expecting you to be self-sufficient from an early age." Emma made a small sound of protest, but Tyler placed a calming hand over hers. "And selling your car," my father continued, "was wrong. Not just because it was your property, but because we knew how much it meant to you and we did it anyway. I'm sorry, Olivia. Truly sorry." The simple apology, delivered without qualification or excuse, was more powerful than I had expected. I felt a knot of tension I had carried for years begin to loosen in my chest. "I'm sorry too," my mother added, her voice thick with emotion. "We've prided ourselves on being good parents, but we've failed to see the hurt our actions have caused you. That stops now." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak immediately. When I did, my voice was steady but gentle. "Thank you. That means more than you know." Emma was looking down at the table, her expression conflicted. When she finally spoke, her voice was small, almost childlike. "I didn't realize. I mean, I knew you worked hard for that car, but I never thought about how unfair it was that my wedding was being funded by selling something you loved." "You've never had to think about those things," I said, not unkindly. "Our family dynamic didn't require you to consider the cost of your wants to others." "I want to do better," she said, meeting my eyes directly. "I don't want to be the selfish sister anymore. I don't want our relationship to be defined by inequality." It was the first time I had ever heard Emma acknowledge her role in our dysfunctional family system, and it felt like a breakthrough. "I'd like that," I told her sincerely. "So where do we go from here?" my father asked. "The venue is reserved. The Briggs account is gone. Our family is at a crossroads. We rebuild," I said simply. "Not to restore what was, but to create something healthier. The venue can still host Emma's wedding, if that's what she wants. My gift to her, freely given this time." "And the business?" my mother asked tentatively. "The Briggs account remains with me," I said firmly. "That's non-negotiable. But I'm willing to collaborate on other accounts, to share my expertise and connections for my new position. The family business can evolve rather than diminish." My father nodded slowly, recognizing both the boundary and the olive branch in my words. "That's fair. More than fair, considering everything." "What about us?" Emma asked, gesturing between herself and me. "How do we fix 28 years of imbalance?" "One day at a time," I suggested. "With honesty, respect, and a willingness to establish new patterns. It won't be easy, and there will be setbacks. But I believe it's possible." "I do too," she said, with surprising determination. "Starting with the wedding. I want to scale it back, make it less extravagant. It shouldn't take your car and Dad's biggest client to fund one day, no matter how special." Tyler squeezed her hand, clearly proud of her decision. My parents looked at her with a mixture of surprise and newfound respect. "And I want you to be my maid of honor," Emma added. "If you're willing." The request caught me off guard. After everything that had happened, it was the last thing I had expected. "Are you sure?" "Positive," she nodded. "This wedding should bring our family together, not drive us further apart. It should represent a new beginning for all of us." I found myself smiling, a genuine warmth spreading through me for the first time since discovering my car was gone. Then I'd be honored. As the evening progressed, we began to talk more openly than we ever had before. My parents shared their fears and insecurities as they had raised us, their worry that Emma wouldn't thrive without extra support, their certainty that I would succeed regardless of obstacles. Emma admitted her long-standing jealousy of my achievements and independence, even as she had benefited from being the favored child. I acknowledged my resentment and the coldness I had developed as a defense mechanism. None of these admissions erased the past or guaranteed a perfect future. But they created a foundation for something we had never truly had before: honest communication and mutual respect. By the time we parted that evening, something fundamental had shifted in our family dynamic. The hierarchy that had defined us for decades had been dismantled, replaced by the beginnings of a more balanced relationship. It would take time and effort to maintain this new equilibrium, to override the ingrained patterns of a lifetime. There would be moments of regression, of falling back into old habits. But as I drove home in my Mustang, the car that had become both the catalyst for conflict and the symbol of resolution, I felt a sense of peace that had eluded me for years. I had stood my ground, demanded the respect I deserved, and in doing so, had not destroyed my family but transformed it. The road ahead would have its challenges, but for the first time, we would be navigating it as equals, not as the golden child and the afterthought, not as the dependent and the self-sufficient, but as sisters, as daughters, as a family redefined by crisis and rebuilt through honesty. It wasn't the ending I had imagined when I first discovered my car was gone. It was better. More complex, more genuine, more filled with possibility. Not just a victory, but a reconciliation. Not just justice, but growth. And that, I realized as I pulled into my driveway, was the most satisfying revenge of all. Hey everyone, thanks for sticking with me through this entire family drama. I hope my story resonated with some of you out there who might have experienced similar family dynamics. Have you ever had to stand up to your family to be treated fairly? Or have you been in Emma's position and realized you were being favored at someone else's expense? I'd love to hear your experiences in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of family karma and justice served, please hit that like button and subscribe to my channel for more real-life stories that explore complicated family relationships. Don't forget to share this video with someone you think might benefit from hearing how standing up for yourself can actually lead to healing rather than destroying relationships. Thanks again for watching, and remember, sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even, but creating something better than what was broken. See you in the next video.